In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaney received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
Circle makers work for MI5. Who do the hedgehogs work for?
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah. Aliens and spacefaring cigar-shaped craft? I'd like you to meet Led Zeppelin.
Anything goes in Paratopia. And welcome.
Paratopia, this week's episode is an exclusive. It's a roundtable discussion with Crop Circle researchers David Cayton and Robert Hulse and Richard Hall, who is the film director of Crop Circle's The Hidden Truth, which you can watch right now, or better yet, right after this interview, at www.richplanet.net. You can watch the entire thing for free right there. I watched it, Jeff watched it, and we were pretty stunned, actually, at some of the revelations in the film that we'll be sharing with you during this interview. Of course, as you've come to expect, the interview will go a whole lot deeper and in a whole lot of new directions. So this is really a perfect follow-up to Colin Andrews, who actually got us in touch with Richard, Robert, and David, so thank you again. I know I thank you during the episode, Colin, but thanks again. Can't hurt to thank you again. So, a little bit background. Richard Hall is an electrical engineer. He is someone who has investigated the UFO phenomena and related subjects, and he is, in fact, the director of Crop Circle's The Hidden Truth. David Cayton has been researching the crop circle phenomenon since the mid-90s. He took early retirement from the design engineering laboratories at British Aerospace, Woodford, Cheshire. And Robert Hulse has also been investigating crop circles, well, since the late 90s. And there's a lot more to Robert, as we'll find out during the episode. Anyway, let's get on with that episode, shall we? Here it is, your Crop Circle Roundtable that sheds some new light in new directions, as I said, on this whole phenomenon. I hope you enjoy it. Take it away, Jeffrey.
Hey, Paratopia, it's Jeff Ritzman here, Jeremy Vaney, along with you on a Saturday morning. Too early for either of us to be up. We have with us today Mr. Robert Hulse, Mr. David Cayton, and Mr. Richard Hall, all of which, Jeremy, right, Colin Andrews, more or less, got us in contact with.
Yes, Colin was great in saying, you need to talk to these guys, they need to talk to you, this will be a great show. So thank you very much, Colin Andrews.
Yes. And Richard, well, I should say that, Richard, you made essentially a film for your website that interviewed David and Robert and a couple of other people in the way of looking at crop circles from the unknown point of view, but also touches upon the hoax to circles, which we talked to Colin about. But it takes kind of a different approach from Colin's viewpoint, I should say, on the hoaxed circles. And you discovered some rather interesting things. But before we get to any of that, I'd like Richard Hall just to tell me, how did you get into this at all? We're going to kind of give backstory for everyone.
Yeah, sure. Hello, Jeff. Hello, Jeremy. My background is I'm an engineer, electrical engineer, and I've always had a background interest in ufology for many years. I was a big follower of, and still am, of the Bob Lazar story in Area 51 and all of that sort of stuff. Around about 3 years ago, I started studying the subject seriously. And 2 years ago, I set up the website richplanet.net, basically to try and promote ufology and put the information across in an interesting fashion. Now, earlier this year, I wanted to make a film about animal mutilation, and I contacted David Cayton, who's on the line now, and we made a film about animal mutilation in the UK, because David Cayton has investigated animal mutilation as well as crop circles, and that's how I got to meet David. And I didn't really have a particular interest in crop circles up until sort of the midpoint of this year. I'm very, very new to it. You know, David refers to me as a new kid on the block, and I very much am. But sometimes things require a fresh pair of eyes, is the way I see it, and sometimes that then people who've been involved in sort of crop circles for years and years, they're not asking some of the questions which I believe need to be asked, which I asked in the film.
David, how did you get started in this, of all things?
How, Jeff? You mean just the crop circles?
Yeah. Let's approach that from there.
Well, the persons who instigated my interests were Roy Dutton, who was an ex-British aerospace engineer, as I was, and he introduced me to it while I was at work in the canteen one lunchtime, flashed some photographs around of crop circles in Cheshire and in Wiltshire, and I thought, my goodness, this is interesting. And then I'd heard about Colin Andrews, of course, and so it's really those two people who got me interested in that. I'd already had an interest in UFOs a bit, partly due to past RAF experience, but again, it was Roy Dutton who persuaded me to join BUFORA, which is a British UFO Research Association, which I did for a short time and soon got disenchanted with them, apart from their very poor magazine at great cost. So I took an early retirement from my company, British Aerospace, at the Woodford plant in Cheshire in January 1993, and I signed up as a UFO investigator with Quest International under ex-police sergeant Tony Dodd, who was the Director of Investigations Research, and Graham Birdsall, sadly deceased, both of them, who was the Director of Quest and ran a very good British UFO magazine. So after interviewing quite a few witnesses and looking at various cases, some good, some not so good, having then heard in 93 from, I think it was 1993, from Roy about the crop circles, and about the same time about animal mutilations from Tony Dodd, and Tony informed me that some of these were obviously occurring in the UK, I decided that crop circles and animal mutilations might be worth spending more time and a little cash at my disposal to go into fields retrieving specimens of both, because I thought there's some tangible physical evidence left on the ground which you can obviously get a handle on and pass to the relevant specialists, whether it be botanists or pathologists, which might give more meaningful evidence that alien species from elsewhere are visiting the planet, rather than listening and reporting someone's sighting of something in the sky which is there and gone, and you just believe that witness or you don't, and that's the end of the story. Yeah. So that's how I really got into the crop circles and the animal mutilation stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit more hands-on there in that direction.
Yes, absolutely right. Yeah.
Robert, how did you get into all this as well?
Well, it's a bit different to Richard and David.
Certainly is.
I mean, basically, I've had ET contacts throughout my life, and I suppose back in the mid-90s, I contacted Roy Dutton to discuss certain sightings that had occurred around about where we lived, and I went to see Roy, and it was at this time that he showed me his machine, which is featured in Richard's film, which demonstrates how he thinks the crop circles might be created. He said that I should get in touch with David Cayton, who was a friend of his, and I did, and in 2000, I went down to Wiltshire with my wife, and I met up with David and his wife, and we got researching the crop circles. We decided we'd do it in a pretty much nuts and bolts fashion, and really we've been looking at the crop circles with the same kind of eye as Richard is doing today. And so we fit very well with Richard's way of thinking, I think.
Yeah.
But as I say, I've been involved with ET contacts all my life, and although some people might think that's a bit off the wall,
not on this show, it ain't.
That's good. That's really good. I've met so many people. I've made so many friends throughout the world who've had experiences. Excellent. And I still continue to have them, and I don't feel threatened in any way by that, and I'm very, very happy to be part of this project.
We're going to have you back on your own to talk about that. That's for sure. Robert and David, I have a question for you, just to start this mammoth show off. Something that we here in the States, or at least I've thought about a lot when it comes to crop circle research, is that the way it's described on every program that you see or every documentary that you happen to watch is that there are very definitive physical effects that happen within a formation, such as the blown nodes or the bent nodes, or more or less the kind of things that we saw, and I believe it was the St. George, Wiltshire 2003 formation, where you had a formation that wasn't laid on the ground, but was rather bent over halfway or a little under halfway down the stalk.
Sorry, that was the Ogbourne St. George formation.
Right. That's right, yeah.
And that, to me, was the most astounding thing I've ever seen in crop circle research at all, because that most closely mirrors what we had happen here in Maryland, which was more or less a grape shot formation that was not bent over even with the ground, did have the blown nodes, did have the bent nodes. All of these things kind of seem obvious. So my question is when you go into a formation, isn't it almost, or this has been my perception, I'm not sure how many other people think this, but isn't it almost somewhat easy to tell that these are either hoaxed or legitimate unknown forces at work doing these?
Well, who's going first, David?
Shall I?
Yes, go on. Yeah.
Sometimes it's not so easy, particularly depending on the state of the crop. Mm-hmm. Ogbourne St. George was clearly not planked because, as you said, Jeff, they were only bent so many inches down from the top, and at different heights as well as you went across each individual circle. But in high season, when the crop's really developed and ripening and is straw-coloured and flattened down, sometimes it's hard to be sure. Certainly board marks are harder to find, but as time goes on, you do develop a nose for them, and the way the crop is laid, often it looks physical. The planks leave furrows between, if a guy's gone round, or a number of guys in tandem gone round a larger shape, I'm not saying necessarily a circle shape, but a shape, there's usually little gaps between each guy's board, which leaves a furrow of crop a little bit higher, a bit like when you ploughed a field.
Sure.
And you get a bit of crop, maybe 6 to 9 inches, not as compressed and as low down as the next spin round with the plank. So you get this sort of groove effect. But yeah, it's... The green crop's easy. I'll let Robert carry on, yeah.
Okay. When you come to a crop circle, if it's early in the season and there's plenty of moisture in the crop and it's nice and green, it has a certain elasticity to it, so that when the crop is stomped down with a board, the elasticity in the crop sort of evens out the stems and the seed heads, So even a stomped formation early in the season can look good because it sort of naturally sorts itself out. It's later on in the season when the crop is dry and there's no moisture in the stems that it's much more easy to tell a stomped formation because the crop just goes down and it stays where it's been put.
I see.
So that's just from looking at it from sort of standing outside the circle looking in.
So the notion of bent nodes being automatically legitimate is not necessarily true then? Absolutely
not.
Okay.
Bent nodes, blown nodes. I mean, bent nodes can so easily come about through phototropism where, say, the wheels of the tractor going through the field has just bent down some of the stems by the tractor lines. If that happens early in the season, then naturally through phototropism, those stems will bend back up to the light. And people will be able to go into a crop circle and by these tractor lines, they'll be able to find bent nodes. But it's a perfectly natural phenomenon. And the same thing applies with the blown nodes. As we said in the film, the blown nodes do occur because heat is applied from some energy source in the genuine formations, and this is what creates the pressure in the node, which blows a hole in the node. But also, I believe you can get a blown node or something that looks like one, if the crop is flattened down in a crop circle and then left in the full glare of the sun for days. And what happens is the flattened crop gets more of the heat from the sun than the standing crop around it. As you can understand, the breeze is blowing through the stems and all this kind of thing.
Right.
And what happens is it ripens the flattened crop much more quickly. And I believe that the heating effect can itself naturally create what appears to be a blown node. So the only time blown nodes can be used at all as an arbiter of a genuine circle is if you go into the circle within, I would say, a day or two of it having been discovered, and that there are blown nodes throughout the formation, not just in one little part or another, and also that there are no blown nodes generally in the standing crop in the rest of the field.
Right.
So it's a bit more complicated than it at first seems.
Sure.
And of course, this is where we may get some criticism in the film because we were limited to time, we're not able to discuss these things in such great detail. So people may get the impression that we are not as clinical in our examination as we should be, but it's just simply time problems.
Well, I think that if nothing else, this film definitely shows that the two of you are down on hands and knees looking at individual stalks in a field which, if you can find those small bruise lines from the board marks, that's pretty extensive, I would say, to go to that length.
Sometimes it takes quite a while. We've gone into formations. There's one formation which we show in the film, which is in sort of the photograph of it, which we say it's a man-made formation. It's a green crop, and it's like a big sort of wavy cross design. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful formation, and when we first went in it, we thought, this looks pretty damn good. And it took quite a while to find the board marks, but when we started to find them, we found them without much difficulty. But when David and I have gone into formations, I hope it's pretty obvious from the film that we don't go in hoping to find man-made formations. We go in hoping upon hope to find the real thing, and we're just as disappointed as anyone else when we find evidence to the contrary.
Yep.
Well, here's the other thing that often comes up, that this is kind of maybe stereotypical of a crop circle study, is that if you have a circle or you have some sort of flattened crop in any kind of shape, that you've got a layer on top that is swirled perhaps one way, and then underneath of that layer it's swirled another way or another direction entirely. Is that present in every unknown formation that you might find, or not? Is that not a? I'm sure beyond sure that would be incredibly difficult for someone to fake, because I've seen that with my own eyes as well, and I don't see any way you're doing that with a board. So again, is that something that's consistent across all unknowns that you could judge that way as well?
Well, you have to be very, very careful with that sort of thing. These crop circle hoaxes are pretty damn sneaky, and they'll try and do things that will will make the thing look authentic. The main thing with the genuine crop circles is the absolute pristine nature of the way the crop flows. There's no sudden changes of direction because the hoaxers have made a mistake in their calculations. The thing flows just like a stream bed of water. The difference is chalk and cheese when you stand, when you have the what can I say? It's a privilege to stand in a genuine crop circle, because you have a feeling that you're so close, you have such a connection then to the people who made it, and I'm talking about the people from up above, not down here.
Right. Well, in the film, I know that we covered over this thing that I've never heard before, which is the black tubes, reported by, I think it was Mr. Bull, was on the Albert Bull, was talking about it within the film. I came away from the film not knowing if a formation actually came out of that sighting of seeing this gigantic tube touching down inside of a field. So it did not leave any trace.
No, there was no formation there. But I think
he did see sort of a disturbance on the ground where the sort of soil on the ground was being swept around, but there was no actual formation. So it was creating a disturbance, he alleges. But Roy Dutton feels that it might be that it was that this was the technology that they're using, albeit it wasn't at that point being used to make a crop circle.
Okay. Well, what did he describe to you in detail how this thing appeared and then how it disappeared? And could you guys go into that a little bit about how this thing, what were the physical characteristics? Could he partially see through it? Did it seem like translucent? Was it opaque? I mean, what was the details on that?
Well, it was Roy Dutton who actually met this guy and went and interviewed him. So I've never met the farmer, Albert Bull. But so what you see in the program is pretty much what Roy recorded. So I would need to go back to Roy or Albert and interview them again in order to get that information.
Okay, is it a prevalent report at all? I mean,
no. Roy Dutton made his own sort of personally produced video. He's made 3 altogether, a trilogy, basically of his own research, some of which covers crop circles, and that's called "We Are Definitely Not Alone." Now it's a kind of just a homemade production, so he's not had that on TV or anything. So I took clips from that and used it in this documentary because I thought certain parts of it, the circle making machine and Albert Bull and basically what you saw in the program, I thought that was very relevant to the whole research.
Yeah. Right. Robert, you might like to just speak a bit about your theory that going back to those black beams, we don't know whether they retracted upwards or came down, or they just disappeared in the flick of a switch, to be sure. But you've got an idea that they are applying some technology to the field, which is in sort of pre-recorded the imprint of the formation, but it only occurs sometime later.
Yes,
it's in the ground.
Yes, in 2000, I went into a formation at a place called All Cannings, which is in the Vale of Pewsey. It was a 9-pointed star formation. It's one that's shown in the film as being genuine. And a couple of days before that, we discovered another formation, perhaps a quarter of a mile away. And in that formation, I met a lady and some other people, and she said that she'd seen a craft over the fields from her bedroom window in All Cannings, and that underneath the craft were lights on a kind of compass kind of machine of some kind, and the lights were moving across backwards and forwards underneath this machine. And so she thought that this was what was responsible for creating this crop circle. However, the problem was that this particular crop circle was terrible, and it was very obvious that it was a man-made job. However, a couple of days later, I went into this other crop circle, the 9-pointed star formation, which was also at All Cannings, and this was genuine. And I went to see this lady at her home, and it very quickly became apparent that she could not have seen this craft if it had been hovering over the man-made formation. It was simply out of sight. But she could have seen it if it was hovering over the 9-pointed star formation. So I believe that what has happened here is that the craft has imprinted the pattern onto the ground a couple of days before the pattern actually showed itself. And I think what is happening is that the leyline energy, which is so strong in the Vale of Pewsey and the surrounding area, I believe that energy is what is being utilized to create these patterns. So it's just a theory, but I think the evidence is starting to go that way.
Right. Have the two of you, David and Robert, have you ever been in a formation doing any sort of investigating within it and had any sightings, any experiences within it that frightened you, shocked you, surprised you? Sightings, I know the sightings of small globes of light are seen often in these things, and Colin has talked to us about Pat Delgado's experience in one where felt like he was being dragged into crops that were adjacent to a formation. Either of you had anything like that?
I haven't personally. Not to you, Robert, have you?
No, I haven't.
I've had instrumentation problems. That's the only thing that's personally experienced. For the last few years, I've been taking a Geiger counter into the fields because I was just wondering if there was any residual effect with ionizing radiations, which could be dangerous to everybody, especially some people lie down in the center of crop circles, soaking up the energy for hours at a time, right, and feel good, they say, but it makes you wonder, particularly the sort of work that Lucy Pringle had been doing, that maybe it wasn't a good idea. In my ex-job at British Aerospace, I was in charge of a department which was non-destructive testing, and we use radiography and occasionally an isotope, so I had access to that sort of equipment. And in one or two formations, at least 4 I can think of off the top of my head, which we considered were genuine by examining the crop and the way it was laid, within a minute or two of going in there, I had the instrument switched on, and you just get the normal background radiation coming from the cosmos, which is only about 0.2, 0.3 microsieverts per hour dose rate. And then the instrument would suddenly sort of climb up to 10, 12, 15, even 20 times that sometimes. And even had to change scale on the instrument, which alarmed me originally when it first did it. And then it would suddenly go off again, just like a light switch. And we even, didn't we, Robert, in one formation in Pewsey, walk out of this nautilus shape, down the tractor line out of the formation, and it was still reading higher than background for about 20 odd paces down the tram line, and it suddenly went off. So I marked that position by bending the stalk over, and we walked a few paces further away, turned round and retraced our steps. And Robert had his video camera looking over my shoulder as I held the instrument up so he could see the meter. So as we passed the same point, we expected it to start reading again. And it still remained just normal background, as it did as we went right into the formation again, and it never happened again. So I thought, this is strange, what's happening here?
Right.
Also, my camera batteries were flat. I left the camera bag on the floor. I think you can take the picture at that point. So I decided to, on my mobile phone, to ring the government, what used to be government-run National Radiological Protection Board at Didcot near Harwell, which is quite 25, 30 miles from where we were. And I was put in touch with a guy who looks after all the instrumentation and explained to him what was happening. And he said to me, the only thing I can think of is stray electromagnetic fields. He said, are you under power lines? And I said, no, we're not. There were some in the field, but 200 or 300 yards away. Are you next to an electrical transformer? I said, well, no, we're in a farmer's field in Wiltshire. So he was baffled. So, and I also discovered that if you held the Geiger-Müller tube close to the ground and touching the crop, it was exactly the same reading if I held it to waist height or extending my arm above my head. It's still the same. Now, if it was contamination of ionizing radiation on the ground and the crop, the reading would have been far higher with the probe on the floor, because the old inverse square law kicks in. So I was pretty confident there was no contaminant in the field. So it seems to me there's some energy placed over, perhaps some sort of envelope, over the field, over the formation, and perhaps extending a bit beyond it, which might be some sort of surveillance kit that ETs or whatever are monitoring the effects of people as they go in. I have no idea, but it's very, very strange. And people have had other problems with, including Colin Andrews, with electrostatic meter equipment reading, and batteries failing on cameras, video cameras, mobile phones, all that sort of kit can.
Right.
But what you need in that case is you need a team of people all with a Geiger counter at different points in the field, all recording simultaneously, to get a picture of the actual distribution of what's going on. But to do that would be a bit, you'd need an organisation and funding, I guess, etc.
Sure.
Can I just break in here?
Absolutely.
Okay. I would say that what we've also found is that the higher energy, seems to be concentrated in the grape shots rather than in the big circles.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Robert. Yeah.
Okay, Dave. I mean, you went into one by Silbury Hill, didn't you?
Yes.
You want to carry on?
Yeah. I went into the main formation, which I wasn't too enchanted with, I have to say. I'm pretty certain it was a man-made job. But as I walked back to the car park, just by the A4 there, by Silbury Hill, there was a couple of small grape shots, or whatever people like to call them, 3 or 4 feet in diameter. And I left the instrument switched on and just idly held the probe down into close to the centre of one of these grape shots, and it immediately started to read. And in fact, it went right off the clock. There's an audio attachment to this, so the pulses or the tone rises incrementally with the amount of dose rate you're getting. So the higher the danger, the higher the note, to warn the operator that you're in a hot spot.
Right.
And it went right off the clock, saturated. And then as I came out, I switched it off. And then it switched it on again, and it didn't work. It completely destroyed the sensitive Geiger-Müller tube. So it was a bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
Back to work.
And can I just say that I have other friends who have stood in these grape shots and felt extremely uncomfortable. They didn't have equipment with them to monitor the energy, but they were very aware that there was powerful energy in the grape shots, and they had to get out of them fairly quickly.
Well, here in Maryland, we had a formation. In fact, it was in 2 locations that were probably about 10 miles or so away from each other. And one of them was rather large and right next to the road. And this was something that I know that the MUFON investigator that I was with was a section director for Maryland. It took quite a bit of badgering to get him to let me go with him because I was so anxious to see this. And when we got there, it was not unlike what you described at Ogborn. The thing was not flattened down. It was basically these things were laid over, blown nodes, no sign of anyone being in there doing it. It certainly wasn't a pattern of any kind. It wasn't a coherent pattern. But there were these small little circles, as if someone took a large water balloon and threw it down in this big field of, I believe it was wheat or rye or something like that. And Richard, it's odd that you mentioned that it was an uncomfortable feeling, because the minute that I stepped in this thing, I felt the most unbelievable feeling of being watched from across the road that I've ever had. And I had that feeling quite often back in those days. This was so palpable that I was continuously looking across the road to see if someone was there. It was that real. And unbeknownst to me, the MUFON director, he was taking photographs of all this stuff to send off to Dr. Levengood. And I was collecting samples from inside the formation. He was collecting controls from maybe 20, 30 feet out. And he turned around and took a picture of me while I was looking away from him and looking towards the road. About 2 weeks later at the MUFON gathering, the meeting for the month, he said, remember how you were looking across the street and you felt like you were being watched? And I said, yeah. And he shows me the picture, and there is an unexplained black fuzzy blur in the air, about, I would say, 30, 40 feet in the air, that clearly looked like it was across the street. So I can completely relate to that uncomfortable feeling, and it was very uncomfortable.
I'm confident that when David and I have been in crop circles, that we've been watched also. I also, I believe, have filmed ETs in their stealth mode, walking just a few feet away from us in a particular crop formation, which was a man-made one. It was rather like the Predator film, where you see the shape of the alien sort of moving across the background of leaves in the jungle. Well, this was the background of the crop. Now, I tried to show this film footage to some people about an hour later, and my camcorder would not work. I kept getting a message on the camcorder which said, cannot be switched on, or something like that. A message I'd never seen before. And I tried about 8 times, and eventually I gave up, thinking that my camcorder was completely ruined. Anyway, about a couple of hours later, David and I went into another crop circle, and he persuaded me to take the camcorder with me. And so I reluctantly did so and switched it on, and it worked perfectly. So I conclude from that I was not supposed to show that film to anybody.
The images in the background, Jeff, were like a shimmering, wavy distortion, weren't they, Robert?
Yeah,
A sudden sort of ripple went across the screen.
So am I right in guessing here that you did capture the footage? It was just that it wouldn't display?
That's correct. But I have to say that I have a great deal of respect for these people, and I feel that if I'm not meant to do certain things, then I will very happily go along with that.
I can relate.
You can't. It's only a few months ago I was talking to 2 guys setting up for a night's fishing at a local lake. And as one of them was talking to me, and he jumped back in amazement because the same thing that I've just described was actually taking place behind me. And to be honest with you, I didn't even bother turning round because I'm kind of used to this sort of thing.
Yeah,
you know,
I'd be looking for if it looks like the Predator thing. I'd be sure as hell looking for that little red triangle on my forehead.
I've had the red triangle.
In somewhat unmentionable places, I might add, Jeff.
Oh no!
Oh yes. That's around about 1999, I think. Yeah, I was levitated in bed, and I fully expected to see somebody in the room, but there was nobody. Following day, I went for a shower, and the old John Thomas started to sting a bit, when the hot water hit it. And I looked down, and there was a perfect red triangle upon it.
Ow!
And I've had this sort of thing, even down in Wiltshire, when David and I have been down there for a fortnight examining the crop circles. I've been taken from the caravan and brought back with puncture marks on my stomach and other things. So it's quite normal.
Yeah, we've got to have you back. Well, listen, I want to ask one more here, and then I'm going to flip over to Jeremy to let him get in here. And I've got this written down, and this is probably a really dumb question, but I have to ask it because I wrote it last night in the throes of absolute tiredness.
You might get a dumb answer, Jeff.
Well, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
When you have a genuine formation, and you two gentlemen have said, this is the real deal. This is something that we can't explain. What then happens to that formation? Because I take it that a lot of things do show up during harvest time. Does the farmer harvest this, and therefore do these circles ultimately? Because I'm thinking I want some bread made out of a circle that's legitimate, and I'm wondering. I mean, do people actually consume the grain in the end from these?
Yeah. Well, we've thought exactly the same things, haven't we, Robert?
Yeah.
And the farmer doesn't seem to be bothered because they think they're all man-made, which a lot are, obviously. And yes, they combine the lots and cut the formation out, and it goes in the mill along with everything else. So, yeah, it goes against the grain, as you might say.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Knew that was coming. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I want to get into the film a little bit here, but before that, I just want to ask, so if they are able to harvest these crop wheats, or whatever they are, whatever field it happens to be, why do they complain that their crops are ruined?
Yeah, well, that's just nonsense from the farmer. The cheeky so-and-so by and large, because the amount of flattened area is minimal for the whole field, and we've spoken to farmers, haven't we, Robert? Two. One was a chap that does the combining, and another farmer up in Windmill Hill who put his collection box out, and he made it quite clear that the damage is not the planking, it's where people walk always on the same place, because people don't like to damage the shape. They tend to walk around the edges, or they congregate in the middle, apart from lying in it and flattening it. So he said, your feet, if the crop is ripe and the seed heads are mature, they knock the seed head off. That seed is trodden into the ground, into the soil. So when he comes to plough and sow a different crop the following year, that crop comes up to him as a weed.
Nice.
So the actual loss to the combine harvest machines is perhaps only 1 or 2%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, in my memory from talking to these guys.
I think you're about right there, Dave.
Yeah. So then they go and claim on their insurance because people have trespassed and made this big crop circle, and they claim this hundreds of pounds of loss of material. And they get the insurance. So apart from charging people to go in to view the formation, they're getting the insurance. So when they're bleating away some of them in the media, on the camera or microphone in front of them, they play the hard-done farmer and how cross they are. We've lost thousands of pounds due to these plankers coming into my field and all these people trespassing. And they play up to this, but really it's nonsense. So,
Jeremy, before you go on, I'm thinking if we can get one of these to show up in a barley field, we got a hell of a beer company. Yes.
Yeah, and an insurance write-off.
Right.
So, Richard, when you were making Crop Circles: The Hidden Truth,
Yes.
Did you interview more Crop Circle researchers than who appeared in the film?
No, it was just David Roberts and Roy Dutton, because I felt that they provided enough objective research for me. I deliberately steered away from the researchers who, let's say, are less scientific in their approach and come up with explanations like that they can't be explained. They're magical. They're mystical. Well, I don't buy any of that really. I think there is a scientific explanation, and it's that scientific explanation is that it's extraterrestrial in origin, or at least some of them are. Where I come from is that I believe that the knowledge of mankind, many of the secrets, many of the philosophical questions that we've asked for centuries, who are we, where did we really come from, do we have a soul, all these questions, I believe the UFO subject has the answer to eventually, once we're told the entire truth. And so my view is I'm always trying to try and get to the truth. Now, I see the disinformation and, in the crop circle world, the making of false crop circles to confuse the public as a barrier to finding the real truth. And that needs to be exposed and gotten rid of so that we can move a step closer to finding out what is the true nature and what is really going on. Because as long as they're going around trying to muddy the waters, and it's sponsored by government, then we're not going to find the answers to these huge questions. And, that's why I tackled it in such a way in the program, to try and expose the muddying of the waters, shall we say.
Right. Well, I want to definitely get into that, but I want to ask first, of any of the really, who you would consider bad researchers, do you suspect any of them of being government agents?
I couldn't say categorically, but I would say that I doubt it. I think they're more people who are blown away by the patterns that they see, and they say things like, well, there's no way that could be done by a man in the dark with a plank, therefore it must be E.T., and they're easily led. They're not. Some of them are not really interested in analysing the phenomenon in an objective fashion, because they like the fact that it's magic and it's mystery and it's beyond us. That's, they conclude it's beyond us. We can't ever get to the bottom of it. We're not meant to get to the bottom of it. There's a higher power here, and we are just going to basically, give in to that higher power. Well, I don't buy any of that. I think that some of the researchers are, of that mind, that they're not scientific, if you see where I'm coming from.
You want to name names? Who should we stay away from?
Well, no, I'd rather not name any names.
If I might chip in here, we do know some well-known, high-profile names in journalism. I think of one gentleman from Mexico City, one lady from the United States, who we have met and compared notes a lot on animal mutilations. And a lot of these people are led by mischievous or deliberate, perhaps government agencies of some form or another, along a path, and they're charging them money, often these people, to have the tour of the crop fields, so they're making a bit of business out of it all, who don't want to know about board marks and the telltale signs of hoaxing, because it's bad for business on one hand, and it's a shame that some of these people, I'm hesitant to mention names, but you might deduce what I'm talking about, will put things up on their websites in their respective countries ASAP, even before they've left the fields of Wiltshire because of laptops and communication. And we can't put the brakes on that. And these people are reluctant to be shown things in the field at their feet that they don't want to see, because it spoils the fun, it's not good for the headlines and their websites and all the rest of it. And we would sometimes wonder if these people are being set up eventually to be made look fools, which might damage the other good, serious reporting they're doing on the whole UFO phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dave.
Which is what happened to Colin Andrews in Project Blackbird. He was made to look a fool.
Yes, and Pat Delgado, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I want to get into that. Richard, how did you come to discover, well, it's John Lundberg, right, is sort of your main suspect from Team Cayton. How did you come to suspect him in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I spoke to David a lot about the crop circle phenomenon sort of after we did the animal mutilation thing, and I didn't really have a great deal of interest in crop circles. I knew about them. I knew that, possibly some were ET related, but I didn't have a great deal of interest. But David, sort of showed me a lot of information. And, he said that, that many people believe that the government is sponsoring this disinformation through this organization called Circle Makers. Now, this intrigued me because, I just thought that it's unfair if that's true, it's unfair and it needs to stop. So I looked at this John Lundberg guy, and one of the things that immediately sort of set an alarm bell off was that the website, thecirclemakers.org, was launched in 1995. Now, I have a technical background. I've designed a lot of websites, and, I've been a techie all my life, really. And I thought, 1995. Now, Windows 95 wasn't launched until late 1995, and most people were on Windows 3.1, if you can remember it, in 95, which didn't even have a web browser. Now, the Internet really didn't get going until the late 90s, in my opinion. I remember I worked for a Rolls-Royce company, and this company didn't have a website. This was in 97, and I can remember badgering, the managing director and the directors. We need a website for this company. We're falling behind, and this was in 97. So most corporate enterprises did not have a website in 1995. This is extremely early, I believe, and this website was set up by this artist in 95. So that was the first thing. I thought, well, why would you do that? Why would somebody, have that designed before even businesses were having website designed?
Point out his age and whatever.
Yeah, and Lundberg's a similar age to me, and he left university in 92, and basically launched this career in circle making. Now, most people, when they leave university, they've got debt, they have to go and get a job. But this guy just goes into the fields and starts this art collective. So where's he getting the money from? Because the other thing that struck me is the size and scale of the man-made circles. Now, typically, I sort of educated myself on how many circles are produced, etc., etc. And this is true of the last, let's say, 16 or 17 years. The circles start around about the beginning of May, end of April, and they go right the way through to the end of August. And typically, the complex man-made circles, you get between 10 and 15 circles per month over a 4-month period. Now, if you analyze the actual technique that they use when they make these man-made circles, they would travel to the circle the day before it's produced. So, and I know for a fact that they don't all live near where the circles are produced. Lundberg lives in London. There's another guy in the team lives in Devon. So they would spend a few hours driving to the area. Let's say we get there for lunchtime. They then spend several hours marking the circle out like a surveyor would, using GPS and that kind of thing when it's light. I guess if anyone comes along, they just hide in the tram lines. Now, they then wait till it gets dark, and then they spend the darkest hours of the night, stomping the crop. And there'd be maybe 5 people in the team, I guess. And then in the morning, they then shoot off. And then they would be pretty tired after that because it takes several hours. There's a hell of a lot of crop to be stomped in some of these circles. They cover a very large area. So it's a tiring activity. Now, they then would have a long drive home, and then they would want to sleep when they get home. So they would maybe get home in the morning, and they would sleep for that day. So what I'm saying is it's basically a 2-day process for 5 people, and they're producing between 10 and 15 per month. So what I'm saying is it's a full-time activity for 4 months of the year. So there is no way, in my opinion, that that this could be an unfunded hobby, as they claim it is, that they've never been paid. So that was the other thing, coupled with the extremely professional website that they have now. I mean, most individual researchers, such as Colin Andrews or Linda Moulton Howe, people like that, you look at their websites, they're a one-man band. Their website is it's unpolished, shall we say, because they put it together themselves and they're not a web developer. I mean, and this is true of almost all individual researchers. It's not a criticism, because the information on a lot of these sites is superb, but the design and they don't have a corporate look. I mean, my site's probably a little bit different because I've spent 4 years developing websites.
Because you work in government.
Sorry?
Because you're part of the MI5.
Anyway, so
no, it's not a denial.
No, I have no association with them. But I had my own web design business for 4 years, so I sort of did company corporate websites. So this is the other thing that I thought, well, there's no way it would be so polished. And these were the things and then I looked further at other evidence, and then uncovered other things. One of the things you uncovered
that I thought was fascinating was the HTML code. Was it?
Yeah.
What was it? The search terms?
Yeah, the keywords and the search terms.
Yeah, why would that all be MI5, spy, CIA, all those sort of, hey, look at me. I mean, that just seems so obviously Dr. Evil to me that I don't understand why that would exist.
I can't give you an answer why they would want those keywords in their site. You know, if it's a covert operation, blah blah blah. Why would you do that? The only thing I can think of is that it's a double bluff. You know, and you know, you saw the references in the film to the fact that they have a retainer. Our retainer has kept our virtual head above water, who we cannot name. Now, as we said in the film, there is no way a private company or charity or even an individual and any kind of investor would fund an activity which doesn't produce any money. You know, it's illegal. They're breaking the law. So they claim they have a retainer who's giving them funds, even though on camera Lundberg denied that they've ever been paid for a circle, which I believe was a barefaced lie. And if you look at the way that he smirks when he says it, because someone actually makes him laugh off camera, you can see it's a lie, that they have been paid for making these circles. There's no way that 5 or 6 individuals can take 4 months off per year continuously to make crop circles. So they're definitely being funded. It's not corporate funding, so it doesn't leave very much, does it, basically? And the other pieces of circumstantial evidence point to who that funding, who's providing that funding.
And have you been able to speak with Mr. Lundberg and ask him for his comment on the allegations?
No, I haven't. I mean, I did consider that. I did consider contacting him for an interview, but I didn't think it would be fair based on what the conclusions... I knew, from what I'd found, what the conclusions were going to be. Therefore, I didn't think it would be fair to interview him on one hand and not... because I guess if he was to see the film, then the last thing he would want to do would be to be part of it, I guess. So,
has he responded?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I mean, that's part of the covert nature of what they do, I believe. I mean, the whole thing is that they never claim ownership of a circle, and this is part of the disinformation, I believe. If you look up any interview on the net of Lundberg or on camera, he always comes out with the same quotation, and I believe he's been told by intelligence to have this philosophy. I can read it out. It's crop circles must remain authorless. If we claim a formation, we immediately drain it of all its power. It's taken out of the realm of the unknown and becomes just flattened crop. So it's this gap in information about the authorship of the circles that enables them to function correctly. Although we have not and never will claim authorship of any individual crop circle, we do obviously talk about them in general terms. So, that's a very arty-farty sort of statement, which some people, isn't that beautiful? But I think, it's an obvious tactic so people can't figure out which ones are real and which ones aren't.
And you say in the movie that you suspect some other people, some of them famous, involved in this. What is it that you're able to do to verify that? Anything?
Well, I think, no, I don't have any way. Of course, you can't verify if there's somebody, you're not going to get a contract, an employment contract that someone is being funded by MI5. But it's like, if you've got sometimes let's say someone's on trial for murder, quite often if there's no hard evidence, they'll build the entire case around circumstantial evidence. And so what I'm saying is there's all this circumstantial evidence. This is what I think is true. And I've done that with various other people on the site as well. John Ronson is another one, the guy who wrote The Men Who Stare at Goats. I've got suspicions about him and various other people who are listed. I mean, there's no connection with Crop Circles other than the fact that John Lundberg runs John Ronson's website. Other than that, he doesn't have a Crop Circle connection. But I believe there are various people operating within our media who are being steered by the same agenda that steers the Crop Circle people, and the whole thing is to keep the public away from the fact that there are ETs, here on Earth.
Could I interject a bit here on those lines?
Yeah.
Jeremy? We know, Robert and I for sure, and others, that there's certain American characters who are regularly in the fields every summer, one of whom even took up residence in Pusey, although he did move from property to property now and again, and they did a formation in a field quite a bit away from the usual tourist spot. So at a place called Hill Martin, which was near RAF Lynham, in Wiltshire, where they're flying a lot of these poor lads' bodies back from Afghanistan. And he put a little tatty notice on the barge-in notice board, which was the room that the croppies used at the time, to notify this formation. So Robert and I thought, oh, right, we're going to look at that. And sadly, the farmer had it combined, and it was all rolled up in a bale of straw. But we got talking to the guy who did that, who was actually an employee of the farmer, a fellow called Alan Sparrow, and he showed us around his compound machine, and his wife also joining the conversation. And this chap tried to make out that they made this formation as a test in the pitch black to show what a doddle it was to fake them. But it turned out they'd taken 2 days to make it, and one evening the wife of the farmer employee answered a knock to the door, and one of the team, who was from the United States, well known in the crop circle business, and MUFON, said, oh, it's getting too dark now to see what we're doing, we'll come back tomorrow, which they did. And the formation apparently wasn't any great shakes, and they actually put photographs up and even put a statement out claiming they'd done this in a short space of time in the dark, which was a blatant lie. So there's not just John Lundberg and people over here doing this sort of thing. There are other agencies at work, and I think probably CIA involved, and probably working cahoots with MI5 anyway. So to a large extent, the whole cover-up business on the whole UFO scene, everything from abductions to mutilations, is steered and guided by the United States. They call the shots on all this, and they're making damn sure that what happens in the crop fields in Britain are rubbished, and they probably use their colleagues in MI5 or whatever department it is to cooperate. That's my firm belief. And I'm sorry if I've offended you American guys by saying that, but
no.
We're pretty certain that the cover-up since Roswell is being steered by the United States and is still being the case.
Well, let me ask you this. At least in terms of ufology here, we definitely, the conspiracy theorists have it that, for instance, Boeing is in on it, or Skunk Works, or, any of these sort of private businesses are working, in secret with the military on, for instance, reverse engineered alien technology or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Do you have that type of I don't know, conspiracy theory about your own British companies in mainstream engineers, or do you just have it about America?
Well, in terms of aviation, I mean, I spent 27 years in the aircraft construction company. It was Avros in the old days, Hawker City and British Aerospace. I wouldn't think that we have that capability. I mean, the industry's stony broke. Even the RAE at Farnborough some years ago were broke. They couldn't fund a new custom-built aircraft for the Royal Air Force. I'm just talking about mid-air refuelers, for example. The Typhoon, which is developing and flying now and being supplied to the RAF and other people abroad, couldn't have been built without the assistance of 3 other countries to put money in. In fact, the government nearly pulled the plug, or the Germans nearly pulled out at one point. So I don't think we have a skunk works like Lockheed in the UK. I'm pretty certain of that. So we haven't got any sort of stealth secret aircraft, you know, like Aurora or whatever, anything coming out of Area 51, because we haven't got space for an Area 51. I mean, Area 51 is a closed-off area which is greater than the whole of Wales in the UK. So that's just my view from with an
I would go along with that. Yeah, I would go along with that there, David.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here's a question that may just be for Colin Andrews. I don't know if any of you know the answer to this, but you know, he's come around to thinking that even some of the hoaxers are being influenced by whatever this, you know, this outside agency is, if you want to call it aliens or interdimensional or whatever it is. The people that he has spoken to, the hoaxers that he's spoken to, are any of them the people that you suspect of being MI5?
Do you know that, David?
No, only one comes to mind. That's Matthew Williams and his friends. They claim and have said that they've been, you know, planking a circle in the dark at times, and they've had spooky experiences and seen strange things, and even hinted that they've been helped and guided to do what they're doing. Now, there's no evidence for that other than the words of Matthew Williams and his mates. Yeah. So whether
I've heard theories put forward that the circle makers or certain people who make them, you know, there's no plan around everything. They're just kind of guided by ETs, and they like a zombie going into a field, and then suddenly there's this fantastic formation. Or that, you know, I don't buy any of that. I think they've got a drawing, they've got a plan, and it's been designed by a person. And it could be true that there's some kind of influence over people from ETs to do this, but there's no repeatable, provable evidence of that. You know, I mean, I know that they claim. I mean, Stephen Greer, for example, he claims that he imagined, or they all imagined, this shape, and then it appeared in the crop the following day. So the ETs read their mind.
And then he charged
and that's actually the logo for C-SETI. Am I right with that, David?
Yeah, yes.
You know, the actual logo that Greer has, he believes that was a circle which appeared after they had imagined the circle in their mind. Is that?
Yeah. I think the trouble with Steve Greer and his people who follow him, his followers, he has trouble with the animal mutilation scene because he likes to think these ETs are all friendly and don't do anything nasty, and you can't equate, you know, the crop circles and all this sort of it.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on that. You see, you can't take anything away from Stephen Gray because the Disclosure Project was absolutely phenomenal, and it basically, I think, it brought ufology onto another level. All of those witnesses that he got together. So nobody's done that since, and I absolutely take my hat off to Gray for that. But you know, I think this argument that ETs are all benevolent, I don't think you can use words such as benevolent or malevolent. They're not objective enough, those terms. I think by all species, I mean, this is Stanton Friedman's argument, have self-interest. They must have self-interest in order to maintain their population. And sometimes if one species has self-interest, it then means that it favours itself over another species, and therefore that might be considered by the other species as them being malevolent or nasty. You see what I'm saying? So I think just to say that the ETs are all benevolent and nice and kind is simplistic. It's not as simple as that. I think they have self-interest, and which could be construed as being cruel or whatever. I mean, you interview abductees, and I couldn't share the view that abductees have horror stories, a lot of them, with what things that's happened to them. Yes. And then you look at the mutilation phenomenon, which is, just as worse.
Do you think that it's, especially given all of the fairy lore around there, do you think it's a little premature to jump to the conclusion of E.T., where crop circles are involved?
No, I would say definitely not. I think, the location, Wiltshire, where most of these crop circles occur, is a highly energetic area. I think it's the ley line energy which is the driving force for all this. I think Stonehenge and Avebury particularly are collection points for that energy.
Yeah, so and I think bang on a ley line.
Yeah, I think that energy is I have the feeling it's vital for our survival on this planet. And my feeling is that the genuine crop circles are a means of infusing energy into that ley line system. And I did actually have this confirmed to me by a very unusual chap I met in Australia after I gave a talk over there in Adelaide. And he told me that I was correct in that assumption, and that the different patterns allowed for a different frequency of energy to be infused. So I think, and that's why those particular fields in the Vale of Pewsey are energized even when there are no crop circles there at all. And that is why we see the Apache attack helicopters hovering low over those fields when there's no crop circles there. And for people to say that the Vale of Pewsey is a practice area for helicopter pilots, that simply doesn't make any sense. For an Apache attack helicopter pilot to be hovering over a field of wheat on a balmy summer's day, to try and call that practice is a nonsense. Flying around the mountains of Snowdonia in North Wales in the darkness is practice for those guys. So what they're doing is they're actually monitoring the energy which is there all the time.
And these little balls of light go along with it.
Absolutely. I mean, they've been filmed with the balls of light around them. I mean, Colin Andrews has had that experience. Yeah. And on top of that, and a friend of ours who lives in that area was filming a crop circle in the East Field one day when a military helicopter was hovering over it, and the helicopter saw her and flew right towards her. And, it was absolute harassment, There was debris flying about all around her. She was really afraid for her safety.
She dropped a video camera, still running on the back seat, didn't she?
Absolutely.
In the car, yeah.
So for the military to say that they're not interested in these things and that, it's just a man-made phenomenon, it doesn't hold water at all.
My view on that is that there's advanced technology being used to make some circles by presumably ETs. Now, anything that involves advanced technology the military has an interest in, it thinks it has ownership over that because advanced technology could have military implications, and they want to take ownership of that until they've had a chance to capture it, analyze it, use it, whatever, to gain a military advantage. And that's why I believe, I think perhaps these helicopters are trying to catch one of these orbs, perhaps, and, take it apart like they did with the Roswell craft.
One of the things that I think is great about your film is that you go down the list of man-made formations, and one of them is the Mayan headdress. Right now, is the Mayan headdress, is that not the formation where the policeman this summer saw blonde-haired, ostensibly, aliens or whatever you would want to call them, in it, and had some sort of interaction with them?
Well, can I just say that I don't have a problem with ETs being sighted in the area anywhere around Silbury Hill, which is where that was.
Yeah.
But that doesn't say for 1 second that the crop circle that they were in was a genuine crop circle.
They weren't quite in it, actually. They were in the tram lines leading up to the formation.
Exactly. So, people try to get authenticity through association. And I'm not saying for 1 second that the policemen did not see aliens of some kind in the fields around there. I mean, we've had so many cases of UFO sightings and other strange things happening around there that I would be surprised if somebody at some time didn't see aliens around there. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't say that it's a genuine formation. And in my opinion, every single one of the Mayan-type formations have been man-made. I mean, the first, I think, which appeared across from Silbury Hill a few years ago, which was a magnificent thing. I mean, friends of ours were actually asked on the second night to lend a hand to finish it off because they were running behind, and we've several witnesses to that effect.
And I mentioned to say that area where the police officer saw those strange beings, which Colin Andrews has researched this last year and got quite a long list of information on his website at the moment about it. He also points out that during Operation Blackberg in 91 or something, 92, so everyone was concentrated down near Warminster while that was going on. He discovered that the military, MOD, whatever, were doing a covert exercise with all sorts of gear in that very same field that the police officer saw those strange beings recently. So what we don't know is, nor does Colin, what on earth were they doing in that field by Silbury Hill? And bear in mind, Dave, it is by Silbury Hill where you got that incredible Geiger counter reading. Yes, where the thing screamed off the scale. Yeah, 2,000 counts per second it went, which is
absolutely. So Silbury Hill.
I'd just like to make a point about Silbury Hill, if I may, which is, this, I believe it's 40 meters high, sort of mound of earth, which it's circular construction, which I believe is, I think it's something like 4,000 years old, something like that. Now, that thing took over 200 years to construct, and nobody's come up with an explanation of what it's for. It's sort of a bit like the pyramid mysteries. People claim that the pyramids were tombs for pharaohs, but I don't believe that for 1 minute. And Silbury Hill is similar. Nobody knows what it was for. Now, if something takes 200 years to build, and now we're talking about peasants here, we're talking about thousands of years ago when people, spent most of their time in the field trying to, get enough food to eat. So that was a massive, massive undertaking to build Silbury Hill. So why would ancient people build something that's going to take 200 years to build? So they're not going to see the finished thing, why would they do that? Unless they were being controlled, or there was some higher authority telling them to do that, to build that.
Yeah, or if it was very important for them to do that. I mean, just half a mile away or whatever from Silbury Hill, you've got Avebury Stone Circle, and that's an even bigger undertaking. Mm-hmm. And that's even earlier, I think, than Silbury Hill. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced that the ancient people were acutely aware of the ley line energy. I mean, after all, they weren't being bombarded with all the microwave radiation from telephones and TVs and what have you that we are today. I think they would have felt that energy as clearly as anything. And they definitely created Avebury, I think, as a collector of that energy for whatever purpose.
Did they have reincarnation in their belief system back then?
I don't know that.
No, I couldn't say. I was
just going to say, if you believe in reincarnation, if that's your society, then what's 200 years? Mm-hmm. You're just coming back anyway, right?
Oh, yes. Well, I believe in reincarnation.
Yeah, you might be waiting a while before you come back. Sometimes people come back within weeks, don't they?
Yeah.
So maybe
I actually asked Roy Dutton, who's very good at astronomy, to do a little exercise, because I thought perhaps Silbury Hill, if you draw a line from the centre of the Earth to Silbury Hill, and then that line goes through the centre of the hill, and then that will then go out into space. Now, as the Earth is rotating, that line will draw, a disk in space, but that disk would have had a different orientation due to the precession of the equinoxes when Silbury Hill was built. So I asked him to sort of to do this calculation to find out, was Silbury Hill pointing to any significant known star at that time, but he reckons that that it's not. That he couldn't identify any star systems and say, oh, well, it was pointing there. But it was just a kind of a thought that perhaps because people have come with the theory that it's possibly a Stargate. I don't know what the rest feel about that.
Well, I would just say that, we have a friend who lives in Avebury, Truslow, which is right next to Avebury. And she has an incredibly powerful ley line passing through her garden from Silbury Hill to the Stone Circle. And it's an absolute impossibility to get a signal for a mobile phone down there. And photographs which David has taken there have been completely fogged on occasion. So the energy is quite something, I think.
Let me ask a question here, just getting back to the actual formations themselves. Any of the global formations, be it in Canada, Holland, or wherever, do they all have the same components, the legitimate ones? Do they all, are they saying something unique and uniform, or is it sort of all over the map?
Well, there's been one in Canada this year. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where it was, but the guy took a picture of one of the grape shot circles from up on his combine harvester. And just looking at the lay of that crop, it looked to me as if that was, more than likely a genuine formation. And I have friends who visit Canada, and they've had all sorts of experiences over there. So it's just as big a hotspot of activity as anywhere else, I think.
Yeah, the ones in Holland by Robert van den Broek's home, which Nancy Talbot's visited a few times, that's certainly associated with strange lights and sightings in the sky, just yards from their home into the field where these things have appeared. So, but having said that, I'm sure that in Holland and Germany and France and anywhere else, and the States and Brazil, there are hoax circles, people making them just the same. Mm-hmm. So, for whatever motive or purpose, I don't know.
I guess I have a bigger meta question for Richard and David. I'm pretty sure I know what Robert's answer would be, which is when you start looking into crop circles or UFOs or any of these paranormal, quote-unquote paranormal topics, do you find that the air changes? Do you find that synchronicities kick in almost mechanically in a way that doesn't happen with other topics? Do you find, in essence, that in some way you become part of the thing you're studying?
Yeah, I don't know what you feel about synchronicity, David. The jury's out for me. I hear people all the time sort of saying, "Oh, well, this coincidence happened, therefore there must be some sort of guiding finger, therefore it's synchronicity." I don't buy it yet, but that's not to say that if I'm presented with, evidence in the future, that would... The only thing that's happened to me is I was interviewing a guy called Robert Hulse for a program that I was making, and I was just on the way out of his house. He was abducted, and he actually saw ETs in 1940. He's in his 70s, and he gave me 3 books, and they were all related in some way to other things that I was involved with. So he gave me one of Tim Good's books, and I'd been trying to buy that particular book at that time. I was writing a TV program about the history of ufology, and he gave me a book which was called, I think David's got this book there, UFO: The Government Files, which, although it's written from a skeptical perspective, it's a very good history of ufology. And then there was another book, I don't recall what that was, but all these 3 books were the books that I was been trying to get, and he'd got them all from a second-hand bookshop that particular day. So I just thought that's the only thing that's ever happened to me. And then he is an alleged abductee, so perhaps someone was guiding him. I don't know, but I'm very sceptical of it. I don't know how you feel, David.
I think I'll leave this one to Robert, actually. We have had feelings, things of synchronicity that happened when we've been down in Wiltshire, haven't we? And elsewhere.
Oh, crikey, yes.
The company of certain people like James Millen and...
Yeah. Well, can I say something on this?
Sure.
Oh, well, yeah, well, I'm confident that people like us are being monitored all the time by our friends up there. I'm not talking about government, I'm talking about ET, and that they help us to do what is necessary and guide us, and synchronicities happen all the time to us, so that it becomes commonplace. So yeah, I feel very comfortable that we're not alone most of the time. So maybe Richard will come round to that one day.
Maybe.
That'll be the next documentary.
Yeah.
I have one more just sort of out of left field question, and then I'll pass it back to Jeff. Just because this constantly comes up when we talk about crop circles. That one formation where it's the giant, bug-eyed, ostensibly gray alien with the computer disk that has that message to it. Has that been proven either way to be hoaxed or not?
Well, I would say that it's not been proven either way, but my feeling is that it is a man-made job, and the reason for that is the technique that has obviously been used to create it. If you look at it carefully, you can see that it's built up of kind of raster lines, like you get on a TV screen, and that exact technique was used within a month of that formation to create a logo, an advertising logo for the Richard and Judy show, a TV show here in the UK, and also an advertisement for Orange Telecom, again done in a field of wheat, and the exact same technique was used. So I think that's a bit too much of a coincidence.
Yeah, they've also done it in sand, again with face personalities like David Jason, the actor, and Steve Coogan, is it? And you can see the raster lines, they're measuring the lines out, and all those images and the way they've done it is on the Circle Maker's website.
Well, why is it that that's still up in the air? I don't understand. What did people not go into it and actually look at the crop and say there's no blown nodes, or what happened?
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've seen photographs of the lay of the crop, which Paul Vigate took, the poor chap who's no longer with us. The lay of the crop is as rough as can be. But it's almost as if somehow the pattern was sort of displayed on the top of the crop by some kind of laser imaging device maybe, and then the stompers went in with the planks and just stomped it very, very quickly, and created that formation. But
I think it's just a guess. Sophisticated as that, Robert. I think it's just literally measuring the length of each line to stomp down, and then they stop, and then there may be a stagger to produce a shade on the face or what have you, and it's just a series of lines planked down, all measured out beforehand. So
that's entirely possible. But what we can say for sure is it's exactly the same technique as was used in two advertisements, which the Circle Makers confirm on their website that they created as a commission.
And on beaches in sand, the same.
Yeah.
I think what this illustrates is that there's no one central independent authority which is going to every circle with independent, objective analysis. I mean, David and Robert get to the ones that they can. There's no way they can get to all of them. So it's a bit of a free-for-all. It just depends which researchers get there first and which way they lean. So there's not a sort of organized procedure or analysis done on every circle.
Mm-hmm. The shame, because there used to be, the centre Crop Circle studies, and that started off in the late 80s with that very intention, and they got some very eminent people. In fact, Sir Archie Roy, a scientist, was the president when it first started. And it closed down a few years ago because, A, they were running out of funds, they were running out of people willing to take up office to run the show, and they were so distressed and wasting so much of their time and resources going to fields which they knew were plainly hoax, because the man-made jobbies overtook and reversed the situation where there might have been in the early days 90% genuine, if you like, 10% hoaxed. And they did produce a graph in one of the magazines, I remember, which clearly shows the gradual reversal of that trend. So they ended up with, as Colin Andrews said in 2000, 80-90% man-made, as against the genuine one. So it just collapsed. So the whole idea was to have a proper funded organisation with a scientific officer, and people doing different functions, and everyone pulling together. And it's just got eroded away by.
And MI5 must have rubbed their hands when that organisation closed down.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Well, even though there's no organisation, is there not a unified means to study these, so that no matter who went in there would have came up with similar information than that you guys would have if you'd gotten to it?
You mean protocols?
Yeah, protocols.
Yeah. Well, I would say people don't want to know the truth. That's the top and bottom.
These days, yes. But
that seems like such a specific thing that everyone. I would think that everyone in crop circle research would clamor to go into and study. I'm just surprised that there's not.
Yeah.
Been a unified.
Generally, the first thing they see is the actual pattern, and then they start getting all excited about the actual pattern and start interpreting it before they've gone to the circle.
Yes. Yes, so the CCS did have protocols already now of things for people to do, apart from just the physical measurements, plotting it out on paper, to look for all these features. But that's all sort of disappeared. So no one in these days is going into crop fields for the past 5 or 6 years with any firm, plan to how to inspect them and come up with the right answers, man-made or otherwise. It's a shame. It's just disappeared.
But one comment I'd like to make, you mentioned the alien head circle where there was a message, and then there was another one where apparently we've sent out messages via a radio telescope to try and get contact from alien civilizations. There was a one where it was the alleged return message from an ET. So when you look at some of the amount of intellect and work which goes in to these man-made circles, it's phenomenal. I mean, some of the astronomical information in them is phenomenal, and the main themes, they're not. There's a vast amount of research going into the themes and the actual messages that they're putting out.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the people who are doing the stomping are doing the designing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying that there, I guess we would have to believe that there's more protocol and more organization with these crop circle artists who may or may not even belong to the same groups than there is with the crop circle researchers, and that seems unfathomable to me because I know artists and they're not all that organized.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
No offense, Jeff. So anyway, Jeff, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, that brings me to a question that at least over here in the States, I don't know how it is abroad, but at least in ufology, which I've been involved in probably 23 years or so now, there seems to be, at least over here, there seems to be, when you get a good case or a good case comes up, there almost tends to be a territorial stance taken by the researcher who gets involved with it. Yes. And therefore they don't share information a lot. I mean, I know that Stephen Greer's name got brought up in conversation with Jeremy, and I mean, there's a guy for me that makes a hell of a lot of claims about a lot of things, and I would say at least our audience, Jeremy and I think my opinion of Greer is more or less, I don't know how to put this diplomatically, full of shit. I sat, I had to hold on to my chair when I went to one of his lectures because my heart's pounding now. It enraged me so much to hear some of the crap that came out of this guy's mouth. There's a guy who claims, he's got involvement in disclosure with this country or that country, but we can't name the country, and we've got this evidence, but we can't share that or talk about it. We've got this witness who wants to come forward, but we can't name him. I mean, all of this kind of stuff happens in the States as far as ufology. There's this, I own this case, and you're not coming in. Mm-hmm. Do you guys encounter that with formations in the UK, where you guys walk into a formation and say some other researchers there, and they're like, "Hey, guys, we got it. Back off," or are you all friendly to each other and share information?
No, we're not. There's an awful lot of pressure brought to bear on people like us who are prepared to show why particular formations are man-made, because people don't generally want to hear that side of the story. When we've shown people the board marks physically in that particular formation, they've had a hell of a job to accept that what they were seeing was actually what we were telling them. It's like being in a club of Crop Circle believers. And if you dare to say that this particular one is man-made, then you become persona non grata, and you're a heretic. Oh, crikey, we've had some right going over, haven't we, Dave? Yeah. But certain people have been absolutely livid with us when we've showed them the truth. Yes, But the truth is the thing that matters. People seem to think that all we're about is rubbishing the crop circle phenomenon. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are the people who are giving the proof that there are genuine crop circles and that they are connected with ET. These other people will never prove anything because they're not prepared to look at the evidence.
Right.
Just going back to Stephen Gray for a moment, I'm sticking my neck out here. But he said he had a go at me in Quest International Conference in Leeds in 2000 when I was speaking for the first time on my animal mute research in the UK, and Stephen was there also as a speaker, and we were in the hotel, and he came up to me very officiously and somewhat aggressive almost, and said, "You don't know," I can't remember the exact words, but about the mutilations, you really don't know what's going on. And he turned on his heel and haughtily walked off. Now,
that sounds about right, yeah.
I'm sure he's still saying now that the mutilations are done, like lots of people, are done by government agencies for whatever reason. They're not, others are done by men, and various other people are saying the same, like Nick Redfern, which I found very disappointing, having known Nick in the past. And it's almost like they don't want to somehow admit that these are surgical operation procedures on the animals, which is very strongly pointing to ET, and they can't live with that for some reason. I can't work it out.
The thing that gets for me with the mutilation is that nobody has ever been caught or seen perpetrating this particular crime. There's a measure of covert technology being applied. The question is, does the military have that? I don't think they can be invisible.
Well, why wouldn't they also just start their own military farm?
Right.
Why would they have to steal cattle? Why would they risk everything to steal cattle?
I mean, they can find them at a cattle market or whatever, legit, and do it away in private. Why would we return the mutilated animal back to the scene of the crime, the theft, to expose themselves to be caught twice and aggravate the rancher, or the farmer, whatever? It doesn't make just a bit of sense. So.
I think one of the excuses that I've heard lately is that they are introducing some sort of covert vaccination or covert exposure of other cattle to mutilated cattle for some reason, to introduce some kind of antibody or something like that, which I don't understand any of the cattle mutilation stuff enough to really comment on it, because I've seen some documentaries on History Channel and have you that kind of at least for me, dispelled a couple of things that I didn't quite understand about the nature of parasitic, things that do eat from the inside out on a cattle. But there are several things still for me that are unexplained about all of that.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Can I just come in on a slightly happier note here regarding the crop circles? One of the effects of all the crop circles has been to bring people together into that area of the UK from all over the world, and David and I have made some terrific friends that we wouldn't have made if we hadn't had the crop circles, and that includes the hoax formations. So, there is that aspect to them. It is bringing people together, and the thing is, the majority of those people are special people. Most of them have had experiences themselves, and it's like a big magnet, if you like, and what we end up with is it's like a huge family, and we've got friends all over the world, and we support each other in our experiences, and so a great deal of good has come out of the crop circles, regardless of who has made them.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I'm curious. Within the film, when we were watching the hoax circles, here's a set that we think are unknown. And I can only tell you my impression from sitting there last night watching this, and I'm thinking, as I'm looking at the hoaxed ones, that they're very vectorized, they're very clean, most of them anyway. But when you get to what has been deemed genuine unknowns, it, to me, and I'm only going by feeling here, which is something I don't normally do, but I got a very distinctly different feeling when I saw those. and it was almost, and this is the way I can best describe it. Jeremy's the writer, I suck at this. I'm an artist, so everything's visual to me. But the way I look at it is like when I'm looking at something that's man-made, I'm looking at a picture. And when I look at something that seems to be unknown, it's almost like I'm staring through it. And that's the feeling I got. I mean, one of them in particular, and I can't remember which one it is now. Actually, I had to look away from it because I was just like semi-mesmerized by how perfect it was. It was just looking at something that I can't put my finger on what that was. I'm curious what that feels like from the ground.
Yeah, well, well, I'm glad you had that feeling for a start off, because I think you're absolutely right. That was the first thing that I hesitated to accept when people said that they could get a feeling of whether it was genuine or not just by looking at the aerial photograph. I thought that was very dangerous. You could soon come to the wrong conclusion, but there is something about the genuine ones which affects you in a different way, and you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
And when you're on
Sorry, go on.
when you're on the ground, well, I mean that's a mixed thing. I mean, certain formations like the what we call the North Down Shield Formation, which is a very complicated pattern, which was in the list of genuine ones there. The photographs taken of it by our friend Bill Betts from ground level made no sense whatsoever. You could not get any clue at all as to what the pattern was from ground level, because it was just so complicated. It would have been impossible to create from ground level because it was just a complete mishmash. It was only when you saw the aerial shot that you could actually see that there was a pattern there.
Yeah, and I'm curious about something else that I've heard over the years, and I'm curious if the three of you have ever looked at, how to couch this is that we've had talks and discussions on this show about parts of quote unquote the paranormal that are anti-structural, that paranormal activity seems to follow in line with stress or change, great change, these kind of things that happen in someone's life, I have heard that the crop circles tend to show up, the genuines tend to show up a little more frequently in times of world crisis. Do you find that? Have any of you looked into that at all to see if that is a reality, or is that just something that one of the airy-fairy, quote-unquote, researchers came up with?
Sounds a bit airy-fairy to me, to be honest. I don't think David and I have ever looked into that. No, I mean, most of the good stuff occurred around about 2001, actually, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm. The genuine stuff, you mean, Robert?
Yeah.
And before, of course, there was some before.
Oh, yes, but,
you weren't in the fields then.
There was probably 2 or 3 in 2001. Certainly the Hubcap Formation, the Milk Hill Galaxy, and the Etchelhampton Celtic Cross. Definitely genuine formations.
I think the Galaxy one's very interesting because it's very, very complex. Well, it's not complex, but it's the amount of circles. It's something like over 400 circles, and which I believe, Robert, you believe that's genuine. But ironically, that's the circle that Lumberg always has on his T-shirt and features most predominantly on his website.
Yes,
so he's actually got a genuine circle
on his homepage,
which is adding to the disinformation.
Absolutely, these are subliminal messages that these people are putting across to try to get you to believe that they made the darn things. You notice they don't actually say we made it, but they just put these images close to themselves so that you might assume that they made it. Clever stuff,
Yeah.
You see,
well, for somebody who claims that that taking ownership of it, it ruins its effect, he's certainly got it displayed prominently on his homepage.
Yes, exactly.
Really? A little doublespeak there.
Yeah, can I just also say,
sure.
that was a huge formation, sort of over 800 feet in diameter. But it's not that convinces me that it was genuine. It's actually looking at the detail of the lay of the crop. If you look at each individual circle, you can see that the crop is beautifully evenly laid. And more than that, I mean, we have film taken inside that circle where within the flattened crop there were thistles, and the energy which lays the crop seems to be tuned to the particular crop that it's meant to lay, so that if it's laying a field of wheat, it ain't going to touch a thistle. And in this particular case, we have film where the crop is beautifully laid, like combed into position up to a thistle, and then just before it gets to the thistle, the laid crop actually diverges on either side of the thistle, goes round it, and then starts to be laid again normally on the other side of the thistle.
What?
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the way the energy works. And we also know for certain that, for instance, in the Ogbourne St. George Formation, the energy is affected by the tractor lines which go through the formation. So that we have film where the laid crop was laid at a certain height, maybe, shall we say, 2'6" high, and as it came towards the tractor line, the crop started to dip down until when it got to the edge of the tractor line, it was only just a few inches high. And then we have the tractor line, and then at the back edge of the tractor line, we have a row of standing stems which are untouched by the energy. And then between the tractor lines, the energy starts to lay the crop down again until it gets to the other tractor line, and the same thing is repeated. And we've come across this in other occasions. Yeah. In the Woodborough Hill Formation, the Hubcap Formation, in the tractor lines, there were small kale plants, which are small green fleshy plants, which were only about 6 inches high, I would say. And this was a field of barley. But as I say, the energy is tuned to the barley. So where the laid crop went across these tractor lines, the kale plants were completely untouched.
Well, can I ask just one thing about as far as the tram lines go? When you're walking across the field and you're going to a formation and you run into one of these lines, because when you're looking at this from an aerial view, it's hard to tell how wide those tram lines are, and also. Well, number one, how wide are they usually? And number two, you were talking about the lay of a formation going over those tram lines. Is the ground not uneven where they run?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're kind of going over multiple little hills, like you're going up and down through those tram lines, right?
No, first of all, can we just say we don't walk across the fields. We walk down the tractor lines, and only down the tractor lines, so as not to damage the crop.
Right.
Okay. And yes, the tractor lines are depressed into the field, so they're perhaps maybe 3 inches lower than the average height of the.
More,
yeah.
So no, it's as if the system that's being used to affect the crop is taking into account the fact that there's no crop or perhaps a lowered level of ground on the tractor line, and it's making an adjustment, to the point where the crop is bent as it approaches the tractor line.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's actually video of that. There's 2 other 45-minute interviews of David and Robert, which you can watch in addition to the film. And that what Robert's talking about is in those other interviews, that footage.
Yeah, and the other question is the width. The tractor axle is what, 8 to 10 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Farmers, tractors, and machinery, so they're roughly that sort of width. Okay. So if you're looking at an aerial shot, if you say a round figure is 10 foot from the two sets of wheels across, it gives you a rough idea how big the formation is, from the aerial picture.
Do you guys ever get the feeling that, or have you ever seen evidence of, I guess I should ask, the phenomena responding to a fake circle? Because and the reason I ask that is the Ogborn thing. I mean, I hate to keep going back to that, but that had my jaw hanging in the air when I saw it. That almost looks to me like the phenomena is going, oh yeah, do this. It almost seems responsive, and I'm curious if you've ever seen anything like that before that seems to be a response like, okay, you flatten the crop, big deal. Now do this. Figure this out.
Yeah, all those same thoughts have gone through our minds, haven't they, Robert?
Yeah, very many times. Yeah, I mean, if you look at what we call the basket weave formation, which is, I don't know, it might be the second one of the genuine ones in the film. I think you'll guess which one it is when I say basket weave.
Yeah, it's completely absurd. Yeah.
I mean, it is so complicated that technique or that design has never. I mean, that was 1999, and that design has never been. Nobody's tried to replicate it.
Well, Matthew Williams on the conference platform claiming that he made that.
Yes, well, absolute nonsense, isn't it?
Good, make another.
Yeah, well, I mean, they actually tried to do the basket weave type of lay this year in the East Field, and that's one of the first fake formation, I think, that is showed in the series of photographs. But I went in there, and it was pathetic,
And it had board marks, didn't it?
Oh, and board marks, of course. But there's a kind of a sequence in certain patterns which I've noticed. If you look at the basket weave formation, you look at the main design of that, there are similarities to that with the Ogborn St. George formation. And there was another one which we believe could well have been genuine at a place called Beckhampton near some horse gallops, which again was very similar to the Ogborn St. George formation. So there's a series going on here.
It has 6 arms against 9 for the Ogborn St. George, isn't it? If I remember rightly.
So, yeah, they're they're trying to get us to think, I think, you know.
I mean, I think Roy Dutton's comment is worth bringing in here. He believes that to some extent they're playing games with us because they're not being completely obvious in what the messages are. You know, that perhaps it's teenage aliens just having a bit of fun. You know what I mean? You can see where he's coming from with that because they're not actually spelling out something concrete or representing something which, we know what they're trying to say.
Right.
So they're not, sort of being honest with us, shall we say.
Right. Well, I see parallels in that to my own experiences over the years. I mean, I pretty much like Robert has said, I've had this in my life pretty much my whole life, and I've had experiences where I go, well, maybe not. I don't think that was really it, and the response I get back is usually, "Wah!" in your face. Really? Is that what you think? Are you sure? Yeah. I mean, that's the popular thing. I think the last question I got for you guys, and this is probably the greatest wrap-up question of all time. How about bugs in a formation? Devoid of bugs, more bugs, less bugs, insects affected by or attracted to a formation? Any thought on that?
Well,
dead silence.
How's that?
The greatest rap question of all time.
That's right, greatest. Thank you.
There have been questions of flies, of different types of fly, stuck, frozen in motion, wings out, antennae out, attached to the seed heads. So something is kill them, some sort of energy. Not seen in every formation, but in some.
Yeah, and I believe
that's unexplained.
Was it in America, Dave, where there were at least, or maybe Canada, where there was like a porcupine found in a formation that was kind of cooked or something?
Yes, that's right. It was cooked, and his spines were all flattened.
He was cooked.
Yeah, I think Linda Moulton Howe reported that also on her website in the past.
Yeah,
it's in the archives somewhere.
I mean, the energy must be pretty damned high because, I mean, in some cases, the actual roots of plants in the formations have been found to be charred, So there's been some pretty high heat there.
Is that the type of thing where animals or insects would stay away from a formation because they sense something that you don't?
I guess so.
Yes. Birds have been known to fly, as if flying a flock of geese or something. They suddenly swerve away from to avoid flying over the formation, even though they might be a couple of 100 feet or more above the formation. People have witnessed that, haven't they? I haven't personally, but people report that.
Well, I have one more question for all of you. Will all of you come back, please, and and spend another 2 hours with us at some point? I mean, because we're not even scratching the surface of this thing, and I'm sure that that all three of you are going to keep looking into this and come across new things. We'd love to have you back, and we certainly thank you all for taking time with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Great.
Yep, it's a pleasure. Yep, and I would have no problem coming back.
Excellent.
Richard, what are you working on now?
Me too.
What I'm working on now? Well, there's a UFO case which took place in 1974 in Wales, a place called the Berwyn Mountains. And I believe there's been government disinformation put out on that case. And in fact, I believe the government are paranoid about that case. They've been trying to steer people away from that case. I'm making a film about that. I've interviewed one witness who's never been on camera, and I hope to get a second one early next year. So you'll be able to watch it from our website, the Berwyn Mountain UFO.
And that's richplanet.net.
.net. I mean, there's a lot of programs that you can watch on my website. They've all been on a TV channel called EMTV Sky. It's a satellite channel in the UK. And they're all on there. So there's all kinds of things on there. Programs about disclosure, and there's some good Tim Good interview and all kinds of things.
Great. Well, thank you again, gentlemen, for doing this with us. And, we look forward to having you back. Animal mutilations, Robert's UFO stuff. I mean, there's a lot more here to cover. So come on.
Certainly the mutilations would make a good program, I think. David, do you think?
Yes, sure. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Paratopia. I may end up eating crow on this. I don't know. But as I am editing this for sound, there are a couple of times when I heard a voice that doesn't sound like any of us. And the most obvious one I edited out of the show, but I saved it, and I'm going to play it here for you. It comes at a time right before Jeff starts to speak, just after Robert has described the camouflage alien video that he took that looked kind of like the Predator movie, just sort of a ripple in the background. So listen to this and realize that it absolutely doesn't sound like Richard Hulse audio, because he's the one who's sort of blown out, like it's sort of hot audio. And Robert and David are the ones speaking, and it certainly ain't Jeff and me. So, who is this? What is this sound you're about to hear that talks under Jeff? Or starts off talking before Jeff and then ends up talking under him? I don't know. I'll leave that to you to decide. I'll play it a couple of times. Here it is.
Huh. The images in the background, Jeff, were like a shimmering, wavy distortion, weren't they, Robert?
Yeah,
A sudden sort of ripple went across the screen of the crop.
So am I right in guessing here that you did capture the footage? It was just that it wouldn't display?
Did you hear it? How could you not? I'll play it again. This time I'll just cue it onto the actual sound and loop it a few times.
Of the crop.
So am I right in guessing here that...
Of the crop.
So am I right in guessing here that...
Of the crop.
So am I right in guessing here that...
Again, this is not a joke. I just don't know what or who that would be. So once again, we've done another Crop Circle episode, and we've ended up with an odd audio mystery. Anyway, good to see we're getting better EVPs on our Crop Circle episodes than we did at our 3-hour Ghost Hunt Spectacular. Thank you and good night.
Of the crop.
So am I right?